All right.
I think we're recording.
It looks like we are.
Okay.
Well, good morning, Alysia. I am happy that you are going to join us just on this question and answer video for the kids in the Youth Do Crew. It was really disappointing that we had to cancel the conference. We had like 30 kids signed up. It was a full fun day, and then all of this world chaos happened. But it's nice that we can still connect online, and we'll definitely get this video to all of our Youth Do Crew kids that we're going to come to the conference. So thank you.
Totally. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, at least we live in a world where technology can bring us together. So, well, it's a second best option, but at least we still have an option.
Exactly. So I got a few questions for you. I know that you are going to show us some videos, which is very exciting. So I think we'll just jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey that has brought you to that Olympic athlete?
Absolutely. So I am born and raised in Edmonton. I grew up playing every single sport that my parents would put me into. And from a very young age, I had always been a goal setter. In grade 5, I wrote a project for my teacher at the time, and the question wasn't what do you want to do when you grow up, but the question is what do you want to accomplish when you graduate from high school. And so I took that very personally, and I wrote down in this grade 5 letter that I wanted to get a scholarship. And at the time I was in the sport of figure skating, because that's what was my favorite thing at the time. And I wanted to go to school to become a doctor. That was always my goal. Now, as we grow up, our interests and our passions can change. But the one thing that stayed true to me and to that project was that I always really did want to get an athletic scholarship, and I wanted to go to med school. So that's what I continued working towards all throughout junior high and high school. And in high school, I was offered 4 scholarships or I should say multiple scholarships in 4 different sports.
Wow.
Basketball, volleyball, track and field, and soccer. And ultimately, I decided to stay at home in Edmonton and play for the University of Alberta, where they offered me a dual scholarship in both basketball and track and field. So I became a panda. I went to school to study kinesiology, which is the study of the human body. I have a Bachelor of Science in it. So actually, I was taking my chemistries and biologies and physiologies and all the science classes because that's what I was going to use to eventually apply to medical school. I played 1 year of both sports and ended up having to get surgery on my shin, which really slowed me down. My coaches said you have to choose, it's one or the other, because the volume was just too much on top of schoolwork. So I ended up, my first year, we went to the national final in basketball, and we lost by 4 points. Still hurts, but I ultimately stuck with my basketball team because we were quite good, and I really enjoyed being part of the team environment. So I played my 5 years. I was captain for the last 2 years of it, of eligibility, and I graduated with my degree. After my degree, I took a year off, and I wrote the entrance exam to get into med school twice, and I didn't have the grades to get in. It was kind of like a kick in the pants that I didn't focus enough on school and university, and I was pretty much just there to be a basketball player and live that university life. And I knew after this year off that I needed a new goal, because I was kind of stuck in this rut of, this is the first long-term goal that I had set for myself that I didn't achieve in not getting into medical school. And I remember waking up one day, I think it was around noon, and I came downstairs. I was working actually at a bar, so that's why I was up super late. And I came downstairs and turned on the TV, and when it's noon in Edmonton, that means it's 7 p.m. in London, England, and it was the opening ceremonies for the London Olympic Games. And I just remember watching all these athletes walking in, and they go by order, so all the countries start with an A and then B and then C. The Canadians walk in, and as someone who had been an athlete my entire life, it really hit me that the Olympics had never been a goal of mine. They never were a consideration because I was always so focused on the school route. And to be honest, I wasn't good enough of a basketball player to be in the Olympics. but I'm too short, 5'11".
That's crazy.
And
That's too short.
yeah, our girls team now is just incredible, but the average age or average height on that team is easily 6'2". So, yeah, watching these athletes parade in wearing their Maple Leafs on their chest and their big Team Canada on the back, and I saw their smiles on their faces, and I wanted to feel like that. I wanted to have that experience, and I was like, I want to go to the Olympics. Now, the difference is at the time I was 22. So how do you tell a 22-year-old that they just all of a sudden want to go to the Olympics, especially in a sport that, you know, most athletes start playing from a very young age in order to reach the Olympics. But there's this crazy sport called bobsled that I had heard of, and it's a sport that you can't even begin until you're 18. So if I started at 22, I wouldn't really be behind the curve so much. And there was a track right down in Calgary. So right as I was watching that opening ceremonies, I sent an email to Calgary and asked how I got involved in bobsled. 2 weeks later, I went down to an identification camp. 6 weeks later, I went down for the team trials and I'm making Team Alberta. And the rest is kind of history. I went from deciding I was going to start a sport to actually starting it to coming sixth at the Olympic Games in 5.5 years.
That's insane. Hey,
when you say it out like that, it really is insane. When you're going through it, it doesn't feel like 5.5 years. It felt like 50 years. But
yeah.
it was quite the experience, and an accomplishment I'm incredibly proud of, and one that I meant to only do it for a couple of years while I was changing my goal, and turned into, I got pretty good at it, and now it turned into, okay, I need another shot, because when you come 0.7 seconds away from an Olympic medal, you got to go back and try again. So that's why I committed to the next 4 years to try and get back in 2022.
That's amazing. That in such a short time frame to accomplish so many different things. But it sounds like you took that moment of not getting into med school and just seeing those athletes on the TV to be like, it didn't take you long to be like, hey, I want to do that, right?
Yeah, and all of us can find inspiration from anything, right? Like it was in a moment where I was vulnerable in my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't know if I was going to pursue more school, if I was going to upgrade, if I was going to get a master's. If I did a master's, what was I going to do it in? Should I just get a job? Should I join like a real job, join the workforce? Like all of us face so much uncertainty, especially right now in life. And just looking for just a random thing of inspiration, and you never know what kind of doors that will open you to. And for me, the biggest part is always being focused on what your goals are, and especially if they're ones you're passionate about, then you're going to reach them. It's just a matter of how hard you're willing to work for them.
That's awesome. So resiliency plays a huge role in this. And we talked to the kids about how the definition of resiliency is to bounce back from challenges. And that was one really great example of that. Do you have any other examples that you could, or stories that you could tell about a time where you had to be resilient through the struggle?
Absolutely, I have so many. So in the presentation I was going to do for you guys, we were going to talk about my favorite phrase, which is challenge accepted. And I kind of came up with that phrase as a joke with my friends. It's kind of one of those things when you dare each other to, do something dumb, and you just want to prove that you can do it. You never want to back down from a challenge. But in this case, I actually applied it to some of the challenges that I faced in my sport that were trying to prevent me from being the best that I could be. I have two examples. I'll go through them pretty quickly. So my first 2 years in bobsled, my first year I was a brakeman. The second year I made the switch and realized that I wanted to become a pilot. And we can go through this video in a bit if you like. And then after that year as a pilot, I ended up winning the provincial championship. And I thought this was a big deal because I thought that this meant that I was learning how to drive the sled properly, and maybe I would have a chance the next year to make the national development team. I wrote an email to the program coordinator of that team, and I said, hello, like I was just wondering if you could offer me any advice on things I should work on in the off season, outside the track and in the gym, that would give me the best shot of making the team next year. And that person in power, who had never seen me race before, had never even met me in person before, wrote me an email back saying, congratulations on becoming the provincial champion. You will never make the national development team.
Oh,
And
that's heartbreaking, even to
yeah,
hear, not involved in the situation. Wow.
yeah. And, you know, it's one of those things where that was a pivotal point in my career, because I could have just been like, well, this person's never said I'm never going to make it. I might as well give up now, you know, like it's one of those things. But how I did handle it was I'd been in sport long enough, and I was old enough, I think, and I think you have to learn these lessons at a little bit of a younger age, but to know that no one can dictate what your true potential is other than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this person didn't know how hard I was willing to work, mostly at this point, to prove him wrong. At this point, it wasn't about even like showing myself up. It actually kind of motivated me. It lit a fire underneath my butt to prove him wrong. And when I showed up to camp, it would have been about 6 months later, 7 months later. Not only did I earn my spot on the national development team, I was actually the fastest pushing pilot they had in the program at the time. So completely did a 180. They had to rewrite me into the program. So that was one of the biggest challenges that I faced. And then another one would be once after a couple of years of establishing myself on the development team and getting a world championship experience. I was the second ranked pilot in Canada, and my team got 4 new sleds. And we had a meeting right before the season started, and I thought that the 4 new sleds would go to 2 men and 2 women. And in this meeting, 1 month before season started, our program coordinator and head coach came in together and announced that. I said, okay, Team Canada 1 woman, you'll get this sled. And then Team Canada men 1, 2, and 3, you'll get the next 3 sleds. And I was like, hey coach, why don't I get a new sled? And they said, oh, because the 3rd ranked male pilot had more points. And we get points based on every race we do. How we finish in the race gives us a certain amount of points.
Right.
Has more points than you do. And I was like, no, he doesn't. They just assumed. And so in this meeting, we ended up getting on the computer, pulling up last year's sheets. The coaches left the room. I had 10 more points. 10 isn't a lot, but I had 10 more points than that 3rd ranked male sled. And they came back in the room and they said, sorry, Alysia, we're giving it to the men anyway. And I said, why? And they said, because we have identified our men's program as having more of a chance of being successful than our women's program. And that was another one of those opportunities where I said, challenge accepted. I'm going to get my own sled. Now, buying a bobsled is not something you can do with pocket change. In fact, the sleds that my team had gotten were $65,000. I'm an amateur athlete who was working in a diner at the time, trying to support myself and support. I mostly pay to play at this level, but the problem with my old sled was to win a bobsled race, you need 3 things. You need the fastest push possible, the smoothest drive, and the top-notch equipment. So even though I was proving that I was one of the fastest pushing pilots in the world and that I could drive the sled smoothly and meticulously, they were going to send me on the World Cup circuit. So the circuit with the best athletes and the top athletes in the world driving a Ford, and all the new sleds that my teammates got, they were Ferraris. So no matter how good I was athletically with my push and my drive, if I'm driving a Ford racing against even someone who might be super poor on their driving technique or their push technique, they're still going to beat me because they're in a Ferrari. So I walked out of that meeting. I think I flipped the table on the way out, and I immediately went to my work and I quit my job because there was no way I was going to come up with that kind of money in a matter of a couple of weeks working a serving job. So I had to do something. I was completely out of my comfort zone. I had to trade in my workout clothes for a business power suit. I had to put together a business presentation that I've never done before. And I had to go meet with executives in offices across Calgary. I had to cold call them to get these meetings. Luckily, I had some connections that helped set me up with some of them. And I had to convince them to essentially give me money so that I could afford to buy a sled. And within 6 weeks, I had enough for the down payment. And 2 months later, I didn't even get a Ferrari. In fact, I like to say that I got a McLaren. My new bobsled showed up, and yeah, I got to go onto the World Cup circuit. Started off with 3 gold medals on the development circuit, and then starting on the World Cup, they thought that I was going to come consistently in the top 12 to 20. And the first race I was in, I came 4th. So it was a big kind of point proven that, and my coaches started taking me more seriously because they knew that I was determined to be successful at any cost, whatever that was to myself, or and I was willing to do pretty much whatever it took to prove that I was destined to be successful. And that just showed how bad I wanted it, and I think I've been kind of rewarded for it ever since.
It sounds like it. So much adversity that you had to face in different ways, right? Not just the competition factor, but the people factor and the sponsorship and having to do things that you've never done before, where you had to stand outside the box and just be like, challenge accepted. I'm gonna do this because this is my dream. So I congratulate you. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and like I said, it always presents itself in different ways. But if you are, it sounds like a cliche, but you literally can do anything if you want it bad enough.
Definitely. So the video that you have, do you want to show us that now? Is that kind of an explanation of what
that would be
bobsledding looks like?
perfect. Yeah. So, like I said before, I started as a brakeman. So in women right now, we only compete in the 2-man event, and we recently got a single called monobob. The men compete in a 2-man event and well as a 4-man event. And I hope all you guys at home have seen Cool Runnings, and if you haven't, check that one out. And that would be the 4-man competition. So I actually was the first woman to ever drive a 4-man sled with 4 women in it in an international race. We tried to get that going in time for the 2018 Olympics. Unfortunately, there just wasn't enough girls doing it to have our own competition, so it kind of got kiboshed. So I'm going to continue to focus on the 2-man event. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see this right here is a camera pointed from the side of a sled, a bobsled, pointing down the track. And we're going to see the pilot push the sled, get in, and then we're going to see we're going to see the sled drive and manipulate its way down the track. And then we're going to see the view from the back. So I'm just going to kind of talk over it as we go through it. So if for some reason, as you can't hear me as it goes, let me know.
Okay.
All right. So this is the sled at the top of the track. It goes into the groove. So being in those little divots in the ice, that keeps the sled steady. So as we're pushing, it's going to stay steady. It's not going to slide across the ice. So this is me, and I'm pushing. And I get to push for about 30 meters. And my goal is to get the sled moving as fast as possible before I jump in, get down, and push a button for my push bar to come down, and the sled becomes aerodynamic. Now we're into the corners. Now, if you look at the sled, if you can see the blades on the bottom of the sled, they're called runners. If you watch them on the ice, you can see them actually being rotating, and that is me manipulating the sled, driving it down the ice. This view is inside the sled facing backwards. Now you can see me, I'm going to give my brakeman a big tap on the back, and she's going to get ready and wait until I'm at my push bar. She's going to say back, I'm going to say set, and then we're both going to start pushing the sled at the same time. Only after the pilot gets in the sled, then the brakeman can get in the sled. Now, once she's in, her job is solely just to hold on tight. There's no leaning, no rocking, no other things. The pilot's driving, she's in an aerodynamic position. Now, if you watch her head, you can see it bouncing around like that. Now, we're not hitting walls or anything. This was actually quite a good run. She's experiencing what were called G-forces, and that's the same thing an astronaut will take when they take off into space. Now, to put this in perspective, astronauts get 90s of force, we get up to 5. Only after we cross the finish line, the pilot will yell, brakes, 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 and that is the brakeman's cue. And you can see she's pulling up on the lever in the middle of the sled. The big teeth that are kind of pushed up go underneath the sled and dig into the ice, and they drag. And it's our brakeman's job to get the sled to come to a complete stop. She has about 100 meters to get us from going anywhere from 120 to 150 kilometers an hour to a complete stop, so that we can safely pull the sled off the main track onto an ice box, and then we'll put it in giant skate guards, which we call scabbards, and then drag the sled on the scabbard so the metal blades are never touching anything except ice. It will go in a truck. The truck will go back to the top of the hill, and then we'll do it all over again. So that's what a typical training day is like for us.
Wow, wow, wow. I bet you it's like, were you super scared the first time that you, like, once you got into a sled? How were you feeling?
Oh no, what did I do here? How was I feeling? I was feeling, you know, the first time I went down with a brand new pilot, and I'm pretty sure we hit every single wall on the way down. And I got to the bottom and ripped my helmet off, and I was like, that was awesome. And there was a volunteer there who was watching, and he goes, and he could hear, because when you hit walls, you can hear it outside the track because you're going so fast. And he said, if you think that run was fun, this is the right sport for you.
That's so
So
cool.
I've always been a little bit of a daredevil and a little bit of a need for speed, and my athletic qualities were always that I was powerful. So that was always something that kind of translated well into the sport. So it was a natural transition for me, I'd say.
That's awesome. So you talked about having to quit your job at the diner and put on that business suit and come up with a plan to go get those sponsorships. How are you now kind of keeping that balance between training for the bobsledding world and living your day-to-day life? Because I know that the training is pretty intense.
Yeah, so during the off season, I train anywhere from 20 to about 35 hours a week. I am so lucky here in COVID world that I have a full gym in my garage that I'm able to use. So I've been in there. I've probably only been training about 20 hours a week right now, just because this is the kind of the beginning of off season.
Right.
And it's a little bit longer of a build up, and I need the snow to melt before I can start running outside again. Ours is almost gone though. I think as of yesterday, it's all gone, but I need to run on the grass. So I'm just going to wait for that to dry up a little bit more. So yeah, my life now is different. So once I got to that World Cup level and I got Team Canada status, my income has been partially supplemented. It's not enough that I can live off of by myself. But being in this crazy sport and the experiences of been traveling around the world and getting to meet all different sorts of people from all different backgrounds, and even just being at the Olympics and meeting some of the people who I would consider, you know, I would be a big fan of, if not role models of, it's really changed my life trajectory. So being now 31, and I'll be 33 when the next Olympics going on, I don't want to go back to school for 5 years. So I don't want to go back to med school. That has completely changed. And the lessons that I've learned from this sport have been incredible. I've had to learn how to operate my team like a business. So kind of running my own small business essentially. And I've had to learn how to do a lot more public speaking. So I've had the privilege of speaking at a couple different youth conferences at schools all over the province, as well as even some political dinners. So my new outlook on what I do, so now I manage just sharing my experiences and what I get to do through sport, and how the lessons that I've learned, if you guys can learn any of the lessons from some of the things I'd say I like to learn the hard way, and it can save you the light way, then I feel like I use my platform as an Olympian for good, and kind of turned it into a little bit of a career like that as well, managing both sides while still training full time.
That's sweet. So you mentioned in that answer that you got to meet some of your role models. Do you have a specific role model in mind?
Yeah, one of my big role models growing up, I'd say, was always Katrina Lemedon. She was a speed skater for Team Canada and one of our most successful ones ever. And she's just incredible. And she was our chef de mission, which means she was in charge of all the athletes at the 2018 games. And her and I ended up hanging out quite a bit. She was always kind of in the team lounge area, which is where I hung out most of the time because I didn't compete until week 2. And she lives, and she's based out of Calgary here. So we end up going to a lot of charity events together now. And she's just an incredible human being. And some of the stuff that I've gone through actually since the Olympics with her team, there's been some drama. She has been an absolute person to consult and lean on, and just an incredible, just what she's turned her life into, I think has been pretty amazing. So I get to turn one of my role models into my friends, I'd say. And my biggest role model growing up, I haven't got to meet her yet. I hope I do soon. Her name is Christine Sinclair. She is the captain for Team Canada Soccer. So growing up as a soccer player, I was a big fan of Team Canada Soccer, and especially that was the era that they started to get to be really good. And she was always one that I watched, and she wore the same number that I did in basketball and everything. So, and she continues to play even though she kept threatening retiring. So I can't wait to watch her now in 2021, because obviously this year's Olympics got bumped, but I'm excited to see what the Canadian soccer women can do.
That's pretty incredible. It's always nice when, like you said, like you got to meet your role model and now she's your friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I still kind of fangirl a little bit. I'm like, oh, hi, Katrina.
I think those things don't end, right? And even like the mistakes that we may make as kids, and all of those are learning opportunities for us, right? And so, yeah, there might be some drama going on in your world right now. And as the youth who are watching this know, drama isn't going to go away, right?
It never, ever, ever goes away. You think you grow out of it? No,
it doesn't happen. I know at almost 40, I am feeling that still too, for sure. I think that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything else that you want to share with the youth?
No, I'm just sorry that I didn't get to meet you guys. You know what, it's COVID season. I'm at home. There's no big gatherings that I get to speak at. So if any of you guys have any personal questions, I actually would be happy to reach out. The best way to contact me is probably through Instagram. Instagram message me, I always respond. And my handle is at Riz, R-I-Z-Z, bobsleigh.
All right, I'll make sure I put that on the video as well. Well, it's been a learning opportunity for me, so thank you for that. I thought I knew a little bit about bobsledding, but
I'm here to share. It's such a cool sport, and it's tough to win. We see it on TV every 4 years at the Olympics, and like, yes, they show my races on CBC on Saturdays during the day, but it's hard to just turn it on and watch and really understand what's going on and the principles behind it. But yeah, it's a really cool sport, really fun sport, definitely not for the faint of heart. But if anybody has any questions about bobsled or even just dealing with drama and teammates and stuff, I'm here to help. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say your final thought would be challenge accepted, hey?
100%, every single time, never be backing down. If there's a challenge, I'm here to accept it. So, and I hope you guys are too.
That's so good. Well, thanks again. I really appreciated it. And yeah, I'll make sure that I get your Instagram handle and everything on there as well, so that the kids have the opportunity.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, let's shut the recording off and then don't go anywhere yet.